Sir, you can introduce Rajaram, sir.
Okay. Welcome, Rajaram ji. Dr. Rajaram Kudli has done his MTech and PhD from Indian Institute of Technology. He has been a technology educator involved mostly in pro bono educational activities. A former parent of the Valley School, Bangalore, Kudli has been a volunteer for dissemination programs at the Study Center, KFI, the Valley School, Bangalore. Dr. Rajaram Kudli, you can unmute and say.
I think I have unmuted. Can you hear? Yeah. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Okay.
But not visible.
Oh, no. The video is also on.
Is there anyone seeing video?
Yes, yes. We are seeing, sir.
Okay.
Okay, sir.
Okay. So thank you, Sushil ji, for this opportunity. I think I've spoken before also on this forum. So I've chosen to speak on the sorrow, compassion, and passion. That is something which Krishnaji has mentioned in a different context. And through my own explorations, it's more like explorations of what is happening through us, what are we doing with our life in the light of the teachings. And then, of course, there are lots of other pieces of wisdom we keep hearing or we have come across from various other schools of thoughts or wise men, let's say, the seers and the wise men. Therefore, what does it exactly mean is this exploration? A particular statement of Krishnaji is, at the end of sorrow, there is passion. And then when he elaborates, he says, passion for everything, passion for all is compassion. And the other context in which he uses this often is in the field of self-awareness. In the mirror of relationships, only one can understand oneself. And in that field of awareness is a field of compassion, love, intelligence, and creation, and so on. I'm not quoting Krishnaji exactly, paraphrasing, what I have understood from listening to, his talks in various contexts and through our own dialogues that happen almost regularly. So the question to me was, therefore, what is exactly the nature of this passion and compassion? Just if it is a piece of wisdom, it's very esoteric. We can go on expanding on that, which is what most of us do most of the time when we are in a dialogue or, just giving a talk kind of thing. But beyond that, when we are actually engaged with life, there is suffering, there is sorrow. And then when we go through intense sorrow, have we observed ever it actually leading to passion? And what is the nature of passion? Looking at that, I mean, it just occurred that, yeah, that is true. At a very normal relationship level or the physical level of most of the relationships, the manifested level of relationships, when we go through certain fights, there is enormous suffering, the conflicts in relationships, most often between people who have to stay together and otherwise also. Whenever there is conflict blows up, there is fight, there is suffering, there is sorrow. At the end of that, there is certain reconciliation and passion. And most often than not, as it has been illustrated through various media, the storytelling, through whatever media, it's all about storytelling, telling stories of human relationship, human suffering, and so on. At the end of conflict and sorrow, the passion manifests more often than not as physical passion. And passion, almost in common language or common parlance, it is assumed to be, it is intended to be physical passion. So therefore, the question was then what exactly was Krishnaji, saying? At the end of sorrow, there is passion, and then passion for all is compassion. And the moment we hear compassion, all other, wisdom starts flowing. Out of compassion, there is love, intelligence, creation. Some ecstatic experiences are expected. We probably have very vivid imagination about certain state of mind that one could live with, if you can enter that field of compassion and so on and so forth. My investigation or my sharing is about what I see when I investigate that, or what I observe as I have experienced. True, when you start looking around, there is suffering, and as normal human beings who have been brought up in certain way in the society, which is all conditioned, which keeps conditioning us through our experiences, professional and otherwise, we do suffer. When the suffering becomes extreme, there is sorrow. Then we, start doubting about ourselves, start doubting about the world. What am I doing in this world? And then there is inquiry. By chance, if you happen to come upon, the awareness of all of that together, certainly there is certain kind of intelligence which helps us survive and act. And there may be some action that comes out of that. One of the byproduct, or one of the, I would say things we come upon is through this suffering, and then insight, inquiry and insight is compassion. We start understanding the sufferings of others. And to me, that is manifestation of compassion. I now understand where is the other person coming from. If somebody is harsh, or if somebody is in pain, what may be happening to him. And with all our energies, with all our potential, we try to help them, which is a very natural outcome of that compassion. So looking at this phenomena, the question was, if we stay with the esoteric implications of these teachings, there is suffering, there is sorrow, and if you can inquire into that, otherwise the normal reaction to suffering and sorrow is either we escape from that, try to escape into entertainment or whatever, or we try to succumb to that. No, we don't try, choicelessly one succumbs to that. We have heard enough of, how the incidences of depression and suicides are increasing in the society at large, across the world, and so on. The third possibility is inquiring to that. What is this sorrow? What is the root of this? What is the structure of this suffering? And so on. Through that inquiry, one could come upon the role of self in this suffering, and therefore leading to self-awareness and rest of that. Krishnaji has also given certain, other pointers that awareness of all the thing one can observe of the reality as it is manifesting, as we are experiencing, including the reality of illusion, he says. The self creates illusion, the self-centered activities. When there is this holistic awareness of the reality as we are perceiving, including the reality of illusion, that is intelligence. And that intelligence will operate on reality. It says truth operates through intelligence on reality. My wondering is that the action coming out of insight? At the end of sorrow, there is passion, and that from that you could come upon self-awareness, and through that awareness, there is certain intelligence that manifests in certain action, which is what he is indicating as truth operating through intelligence on reality. And there is another context in which he mentions this awareness is in the context of religious life, a true religious mind. He says, religion is to bring to focus all your physical, intellectual, emotional energies to inquire, to come upon the truth and the awareness of what is. I'm just paraphrasing. Looking into this, in normal transactions or normal existence, the passion and compassion we experience is very physical. Trying to look at the a definition of that, I came across this. There was a framework called biorhythm. One can examine that. A few decades ago, it was very popular, but even now it is available. Interestingly, the definitions there resonate with a lot of definitions of our ancient wisdom also. I'll just mention that in a moment, which like Krishnaji also has mentioned often, we are driven by energies. That is the physical, intellectual, emotional. Without necessarily going into technical or scientific definition of that, we all can relate to that. We do recognize at least these three, dimensions of energy, or three sources of energy, which we can experience and identify with at a gross level: physical, emotional, intellectual, which are distinctly different from each other, but normally we are driven by all of them together. Sometimes one of them or two of them may be, having a little higher magnitude than the other. This theory of biorhythm actually gives a framework to understand that, where physical and emotional energies together define passion, which we can relate. In common parlance, when we see that passion is almost always identified with physical passion, that makes sense. Unless you have certain emotional flow and physical energy, you can't get into passionate act. We know that. Similarly, it is emotional and intellectual energies together that are identified with wisdom, which again we can understand. When we get into a dialogue, there is not a lot of physical activity there expected or insisted upon. Without emotional energies, it becomes purely intellectual and very dry debate, which ends up in conflict more often than not. Whereas if it is purely emotional, it could drive down the whole energy to some kind of sorrow rather than any wisdom. So we can actually look at it and understand or identify with that wisdom is both emotional and intellectual energies being available or manifesting together. Similarly, the intellectual and physical energies manifesting together or being available together for life is considered necessary for mastery. Mastery is learning and mastering anything, whether it is playing an instrument or some physical work, anything that requires physical capabilities and understanding of things. Either you understand and then try to do it, or do it and understand. It needs intellectual and physical. Most of the skill development or the training or education for doing your work needs both of these, intellectual and physical energies, to master anything. Now, if you look at this, which is what we can recognize and experience and observe in normal living, versus what Krishnaji has mentioned as religious mind or religion is to bring about all your energies, including your physical, intellectual, and emotional energies together. Bring it to focus to inquire what is and the moment, to come upon the awareness, etc. In real world, this passion, wisdom, mastery, the combination of physical, emotional, intellectual energies are all harnessed for doing something, for learning something, to understand something or the other of what is happening, with an intent of exploiting that wisdom, mastery, and passion to live a pleasurable life. Whereas Krishnaji is asking, or rather the teachings are pointing to the need for harnessing all these energies, physical, intellectual, emotional, to come upon certain wisdom. And that could lead to certain kind of passion and compassion. Krishnaji just doesn't stop there. He even tells to his own students in certain dialogues that, he has said this often in his talks about education, that find your passion. Find your passion, live by your passion. It doesn't matter what happens. It doesn't matter if you die poor, who cares, is what he says. Which again is indicative of not the esoteric passion, which we could imagine leading to, some ecstatic state of living. He is telling young students to follow your passion and live by that, which means doing something in the world for their own living. which would include all other kind of, mastery and struggle, etc. Therefore, my question was, what is that passion? Is that passion he talks of when he talks of, the wisdom that could come upon, one can come upon through inquiry, kick-started, probably triggered by certain sorrow, versus the passion that is required to do anything in the real world. We have heard it from many other schools of thought also, that it's rather very commonly said by elders to youngsters that have your passion. Even in corporates or in any work organization, we see, where is your passion? And without passion, you can't do anything. And a little higher level wisdom is, nothing worthwhile has ever been achieved without passion. Anything whatsoever, whether it's a small piece of, artwork, or a little performance, or even cooking a meal, without passion, you could not possibly achieve any kind of perfection or any kind of pleasurable, outcome. So therefore, what is this passion which is manifest through some physical action versus the passion that comes out of inquiring into the sorrow? Are they one and same? Or is one manifestation of the other kind? We are using the same name for that. Action, as the name itself indicates, actualization, which is directed creativity. So with passion, compassion, in the field of compassion, one could be touching that field of creation. But when it has to manifest as something in the physical world, in the gross world, it has to be directed. That is what I understand as actualization, which needs passion, wisdom, and mastery of something or the other that can manifest in a piece of art, or a meal, or a organization for that matter, a school, anything you can think of. All of that indicate involvement of the self. Without passion, which manifests through intellect and physical existence, physical being and emotional being, which means together that is what is self. Therefore, it appears that without all these energies manifesting through self and the involvement of the self, nothing could probably manifest in the gross world, in the physical world. Why? Actually, the passion might have been triggered through inquiry and, triggered from sorrow, etc. Therefore, does it mean that either one suffers, experiences sorrow, inquires and comes upon this wisdom and passion, and then there is action coming out of that? Therefore, when the action has to actualize as something physical, this passion is necessary, which has to lead to, which has to happen with the involvement of the self completely. And with the involvement of self completely, the attachment, the ownership, the identification with the outcome and with the effort is inevitable, which means the sorrow is inevitable. Is that so, is my question. Possibly so, because there are a lot of wise men who have given pointers to this. I have heard in the corporate and in the engineering world, there is a thing called creative destruction. You create something out of passion, but when you see it is going some other way, it is not actually realizing the vision, the passion, the wisdom, where this idea came from, then they creatively destroy that. People creatively destroy the organization, even the artists creatively, or rather voluntarily, destroy their creation, because after manifesting, it did not meet the vision. Something to this effect, I remember hearing from Krishnaji in some private conversation, probably. I have not heard it in his public talks. He mentions about dispassionate compassion. When somebody asks him, that we have seen you being very passionately talking and engaging with anybody who comes to you. Doesn't matter what is the level of their wisdom and background, etc. But when they are not around, when they move, so you are engaging with them with such passion as if they mean a lot to you, and they live with that impression. Whereas once they are out of your sight, you just don't even think about them, or you don't even mention, and so on. That's when I'm just paraphrasing what I have read or heard some time ago. Then he says, that is dispassionate compassion. So when he talks of passion and compassion, is it this dispassionate compassion he's pointing to, which in the phenomenal world they have come upon as the wisdom of creative destruction. So is there a acknowledgement of the sorrow that is inevitable when self is involved, and without involvement of the self, nothing can physically manifest. All that creative energies cannot possibly manifest in anything physical. To this again, Krishnaji has given, therefore, can one avoid suffering? So this is something which again I have observed, or including myself, having gone through this whole cycle, the mind tends to settle with the wisdom. I am compassionate. I feel that, I see that this should be done. Things have to be organized this way so that we can help these people who are suffering for various reasons, socially, economically, educationally, and so on and so forth. But my wisdom, coming from my own experience and inquiry, also tells me that there is going to be suffering. The moment you organize anything, there will be all kind of people. You need discipline to be in place, and then it eventually, and hierarchy of management, administration, and so on and so forth. There is going to be suffering. Therefore, why do that at all? I got the wisdom. I can dispense the wisdom and go back to just avoid the sorrow, avoid the suffering. That seems to be one of the tendencies of the inquiring mind. But Krishnaji says, this I remember reading in the second book of Markli, when there is a dialogue between Krishnaji and David Bohm, published at the end of the work there, where Krishnaji is questioned about his process. It's all about the process he went through. He's asked whether that is same as Kundalini and things like that. He denies all of that, but he acknowledges that suffering is there. Suffering, religious, one has to stay with the suffering and inquire into that. Suffering releases certain kind of energies. And I wonder, is it the same creative energies which are trapped in consciousness for various reasons, conditionings over millennia and so on, living with the suffering, and the suffering manifests as sorrow only when you are engaging with the world, trying to do something. Therefore, when he says it releases certain, suffering releases certain kind of energies, is it these creative energies which are trapped? And when he is asked, therefore, do you mean to say people have to suffer to come upon this wisdom, to get those energies, trapped energies released and to be free? Then he says, no, people don't have to go out and looking for suffering. He says suffering is there. Suffering is already there. And that's where the sorrow happens, and in your living, the sorrow manifests because suffering is there. The whole human life, as we know, is actually built by the self, for the self, therefore it has to manifest, and so on. He explains that kind of a thing. Now, what do we do with this wisdom? Suffering is there. To live, you have to engage. And everybody, including K, says, find your passion. I find my passion. There is an action coming out of insight. When it tries to manifest in anything physical, an organization or a piece of work, piece of art, anything, inevitably it seems to lead to conflicts and sorrow. And I'm back to inquiring that. There are again pointers given by a lot of other schools of wisdom. To mention one of them, that is Rumi. To me, Rumi comes close to, in a lot of his utterings, he comes close to the teachings of K we have heard. There are a lot of other things, but this particular one which relates to the question I have is, he says, keep breaking your heart until it opens up. And wound is where the light enters, which are, which resonate with sorrow being the beginning of inquiry, which could lead to the wisdom and the insight. And then if you get into the cycle of actualizing the insight in certain action, sorrow is inevitable, there would be heartbreak. But then if you try to escape from that, you might be going into some illusory state. You may have to again and again engage with every engagement and every cycle ending up with suffering. There would be some insights which would be guiding probably your next cycle of engagement with the world, with compassion, passion, etc. So with this, I would keep it open for all the friends to share their thoughts. And the question I would leave with this, leave the ground with is, therefore, is it the question of manifest versus unmanifest? The unmanifest being pure insight, pure wisdom and light. Manifest being the actualization leading to organization. Therefore, the self in action leading to all kind of conflicts and sorrow. So is this question about manifest versus unmanifest? Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Harshad Parekh, sir, would you please come forward? Sir, please unmute. Modak voice
Okay,
is coming?
Yes, yes. Now, are you able to hear?
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Rajaram. You have gone into these three words: sorrow, passion, compassion. Our suffering is common to all human beings from the very early age when a child is born, cries, and there is kind of a suffering there. And then the child goes to school, and whether the child likes to go to school or not, he has to go. And then there's a conflict which comes, many subjects the child has to learn. And so this conflict between what we love to do and what we have to do, that creates a kind of conflict. And then that conflict expresses also in relationship with the teacher, with the parents, with society. So we all go through suffering. But in some children, there is something else. When they suffer, and if they are sensitive, they may have the ability to look inward and ask, or by reading a book of Krishnamurti, that from where does this problem come? And in my case, I learned from Krishnamurti that our problems of psychological nature, it comes from thinking. And from thinking comes the sense of I or me, and there is some kind of conflict between thinker and thought. So at that time, I was no longer a child. I was doing PhD, and I was also, from young age, I was reading many books by Ramakrishna, Vivekananda. But Krishnamurti's questions made me look inward, and one has to go right at the source from where thinking comes. So, and that requires passion to look inward, energy and curiosity, honesty. All these qualities are needed to look inward from where the problems are arising. So in my case, I was able to do it. I had time and I had curiosity. And when I really tried to look at the source from where thinking arises, something, a strange phenomena happened as if the mind stopped and there was a different state which we would call awareness without thinking. And when such a thing happens, then we can really see clearly that how we are creating problems for ourselves because we have really not looked inward, and the whole mechanism, the problem making mechanism of the conflict which arises within ourselves and with society. So passion, people have passion for music or mathematics or for some other subject. But when a person has a passion to look inward and really focus on the kind of question which Krishnamurti is asking, like an impossible question. Is it possible to look at the beginning of a thought? So such a question, when it becomes very important to a person, then the mind becomes very silent and very curious to look at the beginning of a thought. But what happens that sometimes when people try to look at the beginning of a thought, and if the mind becomes silent, then they get frightened of that state. And so they don't like to look. So we try to escape from our own self by doing some activities or even doing social activities or something like the environmental activities. So we try to run away from looking inward, and Krishnamurti is always hammering on looking at ourselves as we are without trying to change it. And in Krishnamurti's life also, there was a suffering when his brother died, and Krishnamurti had a belief that his brother will not be allowed to die by the masters. And he left his brother, and when the telegram came that his brother had died, Krishnamurti was attached to his brother, and so he cried for 10 days. And at that time, he was not escaping from that suffering. And at the end of 10 days, he came out. He said, I and Nitya, my brother, are one. So something happened in that inward looking. So when we go through suffering, and if we have the sensitivity, energy, curiosity, then that can become a starting point of learning about ourselves. And somewhere Krishnaji said, ending of sorrow is the beginning of compassion. So real compassion comes when there is freedom from the self. And then we can be aware of the sorrow of other human beings, and we can either talk to that person or we can be silent. But listening to such people who have suffering, if we can listen without jumping to give our ideas, then that listening also a part of compassion. And so Krishnaji, I feel that he had the ability to listen without interpretation, especially in the commentaries on living dialogues, one-to-one, when a person comes, sometimes the person even cries, and Krishnamurti is able to listen to the suffering And sometimes people go away with kind of a freedom, even though Krishnamurti did not talk so much. So sages like Raman Maharshi and other Ramakrishna, they sometimes even help without going deep into the source of suffering. So that is possible, but it depends on the sensitivity of the student or the disciple. So Krishnamurti talked a lot, and maybe those who were very sensitive, they could begin to look within themselves, and then they came to some clarity. And then all we have to do is to look inward and see for ourselves and not keep on reading Krishnamurti, because then we just gather more and more information, and it doesn't help to be expert in Krishnamurti teachings. It doesn't help. One can give talks, but what we need is a passion to look inward, look at ourselves as we are. And when we have that clarity, then that clarity is the uh, solution. So Krishnamurti, we don't need many answers, verbal answers, but a non-verbal looking at what is happening. So this is what I have understood. And I have something to say about Buddha, like a person who came to kill Buddha. That person was not able to kill Buddha. And when Buddha opened his eyes and he talked with the person who had come to kill him, and Buddha listens to his story, and Buddha is worried about the future of that man, and Buddha tells, don't go back to the same way as you have come, because you will be killed. So go away to some other place, take your mother and go out of the kingdom, because he would be killed by the king's people. So Buddha could see everything. And the same way with Angulimal and many other people, Buddha had the compassion and that silence which helps, and little bit of talking. So, okay, I have said enough thing right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Sir, would you please comment on Harshad Parikh's observation?
I have, really nothing to comment. He has shared his wisdom. All of that is very helpful, but it just, gives me an opportunity to mention another perspective of this passion compassion. When we, like Krishnaji used to do, when you try to look at the root meaning of that, whatever ancient Greek, Latin, the dictionary, I found this passion. The original meaning of passion is actually suffering. That's where the patient come from. Passion. Compassion is co-suffering, which is something which we easily identify with. When somebody else is suffering, I feel the suffering. I understand that is compassion, but that did not, let us automatically relate suffering with passion. So probably that is one of the, the reasons why passion is one of the 7 deadly sins in the Christian literature. So while passion may be, normally assumed to be something pleasurable, positive, leading to a lot of creation, the original meaning was suffering, which may have something to do with the implication of this passion when it is actualized. Thank you. I think you are muted, sir.
Dinesh Waghmare.
Yeah.
Dinesh Waghmare, please unmute and say.
You able to listen to me, sir?
Yeah, yeah.
First of all, I would say that Kudli sir, you have given a very, I totally agree with you, whatever you said. And my views on this, I would like to add something. you said this suffering converts into sorrow. That's perfectly all right. I also feel it the same way. When you go through suffering, after some time, sorrow comes into the picture. Now, what is sorrow basically? Basically, sorrow is a feeling, right? When you go through suffering, then you said it converts into passion. That's all right. But what is passion? As you rightly said, there is inherent subtle suffering in it. So passion is basically an energy surge. It's a basically energy surge which is uncontrollable. Means normally, if you are having passion for something, you become restless unless you fulfill that task or complete with it. It may be of, say, suppose I am having passion for photography or anything. I will feel very much uncomfortable unless I fulfill that task. So you are very correct. It will convert into passion. But in case of suffering, when it will come into the passion, unless you remain with it, you go through it, you work for it, unless intelligence come into picture, this suffering will not be converted into passion. That is what my experience. Now, intelligence coming into picture, as you rightly said, passion will convert into compassion. And in case of passion also, all the your three physical, intellectual, emotional, all the energies will be involved. Not only that, they have to be integrated by the insight. Unless they are integrated by the insight, the further course will not come into the picture. For further course of the action will not come into the picture. Now, when we say insight has also a component which clearly tells you that what is your role? What is your role in the moment? Means it is not only having the action plan, it also gives you the wisdom, what you can do in the moment. Means what are your capacities, what is your capability, what you are supposed to do. That also you will come to know immediately, instantaneously. So unless this passion has to have, unless it is insight, sorrow will not get converted into passion. Now, when we say compassion, when you remain with the passion, there is a possibility, if you are, as you rightly said, you said that after passion, there will be again suffering. If you go for it and take the right action, then again suffering will come. But that suffering again will come only when the insight is not into the picture. Insight clearly gives you the idea, what is your best role in the moment. Of course, there will be some struggle, there will be some conflicts, etc. But since you are having that insight, you may not have that suffering, that level of suffering. Now, if you are through with this, then it will convert into your compassion. Now in compassion, it's a very beautiful thing. All the components, it is neither emotion, nor feeling, nor intellectual part, nor it is combination of all this. So it is also having intelligence giving you the insight. Unless you are having insight, you will not be have the sensitivity to understand exactly the suffering of the other. Now, in this sensitivity, you in this case, compassion, you will not be having any sentimentality involved in it. Means you will, here also you will clearly know what is your role when you are having compassion with other, whether you can take any action, whether you cannot, or what is your in the moment. So your role has to be very clear, and that only intelligence can give you the insight, and that then only it will be fulfilled. So these are the broad things which I would like to add on this subject. Thank you, Kudli sir. Your comments, please.
No, thank you, sir. So all that is, definitely valid coming from your own insights. I think I mentioned that, with every repeated experience of this cycle, where the insight leading to an action which has to actualize into certain kind of organization or the other, suffering seems to be inevitable. But with every such going through every such cycle, we would be operating with little more wisdom. that is how in reality we seem to move, while keeping in mind what Krishnaji has mentioned, that you can do all of that with leaving room for a possibility of total freedom with just one insight. Total freedom from all suffering with just one insight. That potential is always there, is what I would like to mention. So that leads to stating another question I have is, therefore, this passion to inquire with all our energies in the moment, and the passion required to create, that is, actualize the insight, are both possible simultaneously without leading to sufferings. That is the question I am living with.
Shiva, sir.
Sir, am I audible, sir?
Yeah.
Yes.
Nothing new, but then, I was just wondering, when we talk about suffering, passion, compassion, in a very subtle way, I'm looking for myself. Is it my suffering, my passion, my compassion? In a very subtle way, somewhere that seeking is there for me to have a compassion. But one wonders, can we talk anything about compassion? Can it be brought into the area of experience? Can it brought to be into the area of self? Can it be discussed? Or even have an idea of it intellectually? I really don't know, though the word compassion is used, but then somewhere in a very subtle way, we already know what compassion is. So, and if at all, even in an intellectual way, if at all we have to talk about that huge kind of energy, passion being a huge energy there, is it just my suffering that will lead to passion? Is it my suffering will that lead to, if at all, there is something called compassion? Or is it I go beyond self, I understand the suffering per se, suffering as a whole, suffering as a humanity, suffering of the entire humanity. Though we know, yes, I am the consciousness, content of the consciousness, me, all that is intellectual words, but then real feeling of the entire consciousness, the entire suffering of the humanity. So this suffering is not my individual suffering that will lead to all this, though it is not divide of individual. Individual is already still a part of that entire society, is not separate. That separateness is not there. Probably that separateness should go, and probably that huge suffering of the world, that energy probably might lead to passion, and then afterwards I really don't know. So this is some of the thoughts I thought I'll share. So what would be your thoughts on this, sir?
Yeah, all thoughts are in the right place in an inquiry. As you said, most often than not, it is intellectual, because when we have to communicate, intellect is the only tool we have. But whatever manifests through individual is individual experience. Krishnaji also mentions about there is a particular mind. We all carry our particular minds, which are part of a mind, a universal mind, and so on. So your suffering is not your personal suffering; it is suffering of the mankind. But if one doesn't see it on his own, if a particular mind doesn't see on its own, doesn't come upon the insight to that effect, then it remains a concept. And operating with a concept without having insight into that can be more miserable. I'll give you a particular example. Krishnaji keeps saying in many of his talks, you don't know what love is. You have love for your wife, children, that is not love. If you take that literally, your life will become miserable. So I would just leave it at that. And then since we came to that, I just have this, I have to mention this, Krishnaji, in all our views and in the view of the world, he is somebody who was liberated, who has said, he has touched the source of creation. He has probably actually touched the source of all sorrow. He has seen his personal sorrow as the sorrow of the mankind, etc. And he had great insights. And if there was one action that could come out of that insight, it had to be schools. It had to be the foundation to preserve his teachings or to disseminate his teaching, and the schools. But the manifestation of the school or foundation and the school as organizations with a lot of people involved, and then making it available through further action through teaching and learning in the schools, through teachers, through the participation of teachers and parents, is lot of reality, lot of organization. And Krishnamurti himself has mentioned with a particular very popular joke actually about organization being devil's work. And that's what you see. If you engage with the schools as a parent or as a teacher and students, all kind of things they go through because based on probably their personal, where they are in their life's journey, what is the preparation they have gone through, etc. So there itself you could see, one can talk of one's own suffering and inquiry, insight and action and actualization of that and whatever happens with that. The other is we are all connected to Krishnaji's teachings, looking into that. If you look at his life and teachings and the organizations together, you would see a lot of things we are talking about.
Dinesh Waghmare. Dinesh, please unmute and say.
Hello.
A bit loud, sir.
Are you able to listen to me?
Yes.
I totally agree with you, whatever you said right now. You put also another question, whether again there will be inquiry. Actually, in my views and my experience, all these components, whatever you have said, they merge together and all these energies merge together. So at that level, there is a seeing is doing. So there is no, this question doesn't stand whether inquiry will be there or not. Yeah. If it is to be there, it will be there, and at the same time, all components will be covered in that, and you will also get the immediately action. So automatically, there will be no such separation or something of that sort. It will be all together, and this question doesn't stand at all, whether there will be any further inquiry or not. If it has to come, it will come, and or it will cover all the components, and you will get the solution. Also, solution means, as you rightly said, a particular person with his individuality, he will know. Yes, sir. This is what I feel.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Sir, can I speak, sir?
Yes.
So it is nice to hear Dr. Rajaram after a gap of 2-3 years. So I have a small question, sir. Sorrow, if you stay with sorrow, that leads to passion, love, compassionate, and intelligence. That is what Krishnamurti is telling. Do we ever stay with the sorrow, sir? For example, death of some near friend or dear. So immediately we escape from that. The faith, hope, and the reincarnation, belief, gods, etc. We take that escape routes and we don't stay with them. So we never stay with the sorrow. We always find escape routes. So that's why we are not getting that passion. One more thing, whether this sorrow, stay with the sorrow, then passion. So the passion goes together with the self, that is center, or effort, that is to become passionate, and motive to have the compassion. Whether self, effort, and motive, whether they go together with the passion, or The passion turns into compassionate only in the absence of these three elements. While listening to you, you were initially you were telling about the passion, self-effort, etc., like that you were mentioning. That's why I'm just confused. Whether the passion leads to compassion only in the absence of self-effort and motive, or they go together. Thank you, sir.
So I can just mention this. See, we've heard from Krishnaji a lot of things, like, staying with suffering will lead to passion, compassion, and so on. But if we make a concept out of that, then again we are moving away from what is of our individual mind and individual life. So if you already know that we are not staying with sorrow, then nothing else anybody else can do about it, right? So if you have suffering and sorrow, you have to live with that and then see what happens without making a concept of or an objective of this should happen after this, because Krishnaji has told. And that's a trap in any school of wisdom or in any, studying any teachings. So this reminds me, even in my early, when I started inquiring and came across Krishnaji, etc., I was guided by some very senior people like Krishnaji was there, told me, these teachings, Krishnaji's teachings or any other teachings are not to be understood. They are to understand oneself. In the light of those teachings, one has to understand oneself, not try to understand the teaching, which is very subtle probably, but then it is also obvious. With our understanding of the teaching would be only intellectual, but you take every statement as possibly a hypothesis, and in the light of that statement, can we look into ourselves? How is my particular mind operating when it suffers, when it is ecstatic, or in any other moment? That's what could lead to whatever happens, not with a concept of what we have heard from Krishnaji or any other school of thought. Thank you.
Dr. Pradeep.
Yes, sir. Am I audible?
Audible.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay, thank you. And good morning to all the friends. A very interesting topic, of course, usually with number of words. I saw the subtle suffering of a speaker, so many words pressing him from all sides, struggling with them, reading, delivering, and thinking simultaneously to share something which was much more than can be given in chronological time in a particular moment. So, compassion, passion, and sorrow, these three words, how I took those things. Inevitable word is very interesting, inevitable cycle in actuality. All the three words are related to the center that is me, although me is not a very good welcome word in spiritual realm so-called. Perception of the ever-changing life is to discenter. The feelings associated with these words, are just like waves in me, leaving tangible marks on my body. If I can see, if I am alert, I can see these very clearly in me and also in so-called others. You see, which is the extension of me. As sympathy and empathy, these words are very interesting. The question is, who suffers?
Yes. Yes.
Who suffers? And the simple answer, which is palatable to all of us, is one who is isolated. One who is isolated suffers. So, although we go on dividing things, this is a physical passion, psychological passion. To me, when self is working, the psychology is the root of everything, almost everything. It may not be as tangible as it should be. JK said very interesting, two very simple things: passion with cause and passion without cause. That makes all the difference. Naturally, passion with cause relates very much to the self who is craving for something, desiring something, after something, and the energy is directed towards that goal. Whereas passion without cause, something like which you call as holistic living, sort of, when the entire energy is supposed to be available to me to sing, to see, and perceive everything as it is. You see, this is something like selfless self, something, or number of words can be given. One question which may not directly related to this, but it is definitely related to inquiry. We are usually talking about seeing things clearly, seeing things very clearly under certain conditions. You see? Things as they are. One may never be able to see things as they really are. I would like to call it as they appear to me, or to appear to anyone. It means now we can all understand what can alter that appearance in individual, that is the self. So ultimately the whole story is related to the journey of self. So passion, compassion, and they are all related to that center, which receives, feels, and things happen to it, through it, what we call action. That also he has largely covered, Rajaramji. So this is all what I wanted to share with friends. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Is there any comment from your end, sir?
Yeah, so I would just mention this, not necessarily comment on what he shared. It's like that triggered another sharing where he was mentioning, we cannot see most often than not things as they are. How it relates to, the passion leading to suffering is, the suffering is essentially because of the self and the attachments, right?
Yes.
And one of the insights I've heard is that where there is attachment, it creates blindness. We can't see things as they are. That's one. And then Krishnaji actually keeps on talking of seeing what is. And he says, what is includes the observer and the observed, which keeps changing. It's not constant. With every life experience, the attachments, whatever, it keeps changing. So seeing is of the what is, which is normally the observer and the observed with all its complexities, which keep changing. And then finally he ends saying that when there is no illusion, then what is sacred. That's all.
Arun, sir.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Sir, related to this topic, I have another part of, another way of looking at it. See, the sorrow as such, if you look at it, we never take in the sorrow which is inflicted on others. Say, if you say, I've seen mostly how the current world lives is like whether people who are really powerful and all that, the more they make the other person suffer and struggle, they become very successful. If you look at it, right? So there's a lot of madness, extortion, and all that. So how do you deal with such situations? One is, okay, I look at my own suffering and sorrow. I might be free of it, but but some other person outside, no, the world is not the way we think it is, no. We might be, our home environment might be a very protective one, but we generally, when we go to the outside world, it is not protective. So how do we deal with such kind of very, very difficult people, that's what my question is. Thank you.
I'm not sure whether we can go into that mode of advising what to do in a situation. But certainly, if there is suffering, that's where the inquiry could start. What is my involvement in that, external world because of which I am suffering? That's all I could say.
Harish,
Okay.
please.
Yeah. Okay. Namaskar.
Namaskar.
I was just wondering about what Dr. Rajaram Kudli said. We need not take Krishnaji's statement, your love for your wife and children is not love. He added that if we took that literally or practically, our life will be miserable. My feeling is that our life need not be miserable if we took that literally, because at no point Krishnaji says showing your affection or care, concern for your children or wife is a sin, or that is irreligious. Certainly not. And if I'm not affectionate or caring towards my wife and children, I don't think there is any guarantee that I will be able to come upon that universal love and compassion. So charity begins at home. What after I or somebody discovers that true love, the relationship with wife and children may remain the same. May remain, I am using the word. If before I was callous, I was uncaring, certainly I will become more caring. But yes, if my attachment to them made me say yes to everything they said, that is certainly not the right way, because Krishnaji also has taught us that love and compassion, they have their own intelligence also. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Shiva Kumar.
Yeah, in relation to what you said just now, with respect to what is, okay, constant, it's a dynamic kind of thing, between observer and observer that's happening. So I was just wondering, when Krishna says, the whole of life is in this moment. He also says all past, present, future is now. So why can't I be with this moment? I'm not saying it is difficult or not difficult. I'm saying so should I get into finding out all the things about suffering or searching or understanding suffering or understanding all these things, or just living in this moment, knowing very well life is in this moment. The entire life of me, life comes into picture only in this moment. It is not, life is not there a moment before or after. And knowing very well all my conditioning is happening now. So the simplest, is it not simplest to be no, I do understand that it is not that simple to be in what you state, but then what I'm saying is the entire philosophy, can't it be bought summarized to this one thing and then be with that? Can't it be a more simple, because yes, Krishnamurti has spoken under different context, in a different situation with different people, different things. And in the process, we are spending a lot of time, going through every single thing, where my thought, myself is all the time trying to think no, I am understanding. I listen to this talk. Oh, today I understood something. Then I go to, then immediately it'll motivate me to go to another talk. And this goes on, where this is taking me away from living the moment. So I just wanted your comment on that. Thank you.
Sure. See, the context of mentioning, this thing, what is essentially observer and the observed. And when there is no illusion, what is sacred, is what he has said. The reason that got triggered, the statement got mentioned, was that in my understanding of all the teachings is, it is this illusory separation between the observer and observed is the root cause of sorrow and suffering. We cannot probably go into the details of how this understanding comes about, but that's what is my understanding, that the observer is the observed, but that they are separate is an illusion. And that illusion is, all of the self. right? Self with all its complexities, manifestations. So when there is an insight, then you are living that. And that's what you are referring to as living in the moment, etc. Yes, it sounds like, we have got a feeling that there is tremendous wisdom in that. It's a tremendous insight. But then, like everybody else, and a lot of people here also have said, probably we cannot talk about it. One has to come upon that by one's own inquiry, and that's it. And Krishnaji says that very passionately, that you are tremendously alone in this inquiry, tremendously alone in this inquiry. Nothing else can be helpful, including his own, personality things. Right? So we just have a feeling for that. We have to stay with that and inquire all by ourselves, all by oneself.
Harshad sir. Harshad sir.
Yes.
Harshad.
Yes, so I like to say that our mind goes in that direction in which it is deeply and unconsciously interested in. So if we try to understand Krishnamurti or even try to understand ourselves, but we are not able to do it, it means that we are really not interested in. We are not very, very curious. We don't have the energy, the passion to look inward. So that is one thing. And many people also tell me that life is meaningful, they say, only because we have problems. And if we don't have problems, they say that life would be very boring. But I feel that they are saying that because they have not really come to that state of freedom, which people are talking, the sages, Krishnamurti. When a person has really a kind of a freedom or compassion, then that itself is the source of happiness or fulfillment. Then we don't try to become anything else. But as long as we are not very clear, we will try to achieve something. And thinking that by going deeper into oneself, we will come to freedom, but that may be very temporary. So the question is, are we naturally curious to look inward, not because we want to get something out of it, but we find it very interesting to look, like the way children look at the butterfly or birds. They are not trying to gather information, but they are looking. So in the same way, when we become very curious to look at the beginning of thoughts, then there may happen something, some new phenomenon may happen. So, and about the compassion which we are talking is very, very rare because it requires a real freedom from the self. But we get the idea about what compassion is by reading the stories of our sages who were very, very compassionate. So talking about compassion is not compassion. It comes only when there is a freedom from the self and when there is silent looking at everything. Okay, I have said enough thing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Rajaram ji, you wanted to add something here?
No, nothing. I think he has said it. We cannot talk about, the compassion or, that living in the moment kind of wisdom.
Prasad sir.
Sir, it's a very deep subject. And actually, I am out of my depths. But I consider these three terms: sorrow, passion, compassion. My understanding is very limited, not as deep as Dr. Rajaram. My understanding, limited understanding, is that normally in sorrow. He is in sorrow for his own matters. That is, he has lost his wife, or he has become a bankrupt, or he lost his promotion, or whatever. These secular things. And he is in sorrow for these things. And it is also true that he doesn't face that sorrow or that suffering. The normal tendency is to escape from that sorrow through so many means, like cinemas or religion or whatever, or drink. So he escapes through this suffering and all that. And Dr. Rajaram has also made a wonderful observation that the division between the observer and the observed, that causes this sorrow or adds to it. And he has also mentioned a more beautiful observation, that is, when there is no division between these two, what is sacred? I don't really understand the significance of that statement, how what is becomes a sacred when I observe it without the division between the. So anyway, possibly what is sacred because the entire creation is sacred. And you are observing the creation without your prejudices, without your background. You are observing it as it is, when there is no division between observer and observer. Maybe that is the significance of that statement. So anyway, once you face your suffering or sorrow, it ends. When it ends, possibly there is passion. So long as you are immersed in your suffering, you cannot have passion, because you are deep in that suffering. If passion becomes a compassion when you start observing the world and the suffering in the world. That is, you come out of yourself, then it becomes, you observe the world, the amount of suffering that is there in the world already because of wars, conflicts, so many things, butchering, killing of seals, all those things. When you start observing, when you see the poverty around, then it becomes compassion, possibly. This passion, Dr. Rajaram has also asked us, is there a division, is this passion different from the passion required of a student to choose his path of life? I think, yes. Normally, a student chooses his profession for various reasons, which are really not connected with that profession. You become a lawyer because you think you can make a lot of money out of it. Or you become a doctor because you think you can make a lot of money out of it. Because your father wants you to become that. Krishnaji wants you to select your profession because you love it. You love lawyering because you can defend justice, or you bring justice to those who are in need of it, like that. When you have that type of approach, that is a passion. But the passion which comes out of sorrow, the ending of sorrow, etc., that is much wider and more religious. The passion for a profession is not contradictory to passion towards life, but they're slightly different. The word is used in different senses. That is how I understand. So it is only when your sorrow ends, personal sorrow ends, that you have a mind for a compassionate mind, compassionate towards the world, towards the creation, towards nature. Okay, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Last one, Pradeep, sir.
Yes. Thank you. There is hardly any time, but regarding these things, seeing things clearly as they are, it's related to that. Everybody feels that he is seeing things clearly as it is. Everybody. There is no one else to certify that. Then, if suffering is the litmus test, you see, observer and observed, no problem. You don't become that which you observe, right? The problem is attachment and not getting it. That is the problem, not the observed. You don't become that observed. Communion is possible, but you don't become that. You don't become a tree or a flower or whatever it is. So that is not the problem. The problem is likes and dislikes, attachment, hatred, and this thing and this thing. This is the problem. So everybody feels that he is seeing things as they are. First thing. So nobody else can question it. The problem, the person, if he faces problem, then he has to see what is wrong with my seeing. I took it for something and it is something else. Then probably something, a different learning experience happens. So as such, the problems are not there. Thank you very much. I have taken, I think, just enough time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pradeep ji. Would you please conclude, sir, as the time is ending, sir? Rajaram ji, would you please conclude, sir?
Sure. So I just thought we could, conclude with this wisdom. If it is about the insight, the passion, which is manifest versus unmanifest, the insight is unmanifest. When it has to manifest through an action, in actuality, it would be manifest, which seem to lead to, inevitably the suffering, because self has to be God. So there is one coming from the world of poets, that heard melodies are sweet, but those unheard are sweeter. Probably that is the truth we have to live with. Thank you.
Thank you
Probably
very
word
much.
is interesting in this.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. You are very special to us, and we will call you back anytime we like. Hope that
Thank
you
you,
will
sir.
be continue cooperating us, sir. Thank you
Thank
very
you
much.
all. Thank you.
Thanks to every participant. Thanks to all. And Mr. Modak, would you please
Indeed.
end it?